me, like methadone was the treatment. Like I invested in the methadone program. Like I invested emotionally into being on that methadone maintenance program. Like my life depended on it because it did.
Yep.
Like I was like, this is, if I do this, like I had a super supportive counselor there. I was really lucky. And she was like, you got to do this for your kids. Like you got, and I was like, yeah, like, cause I had heard that my mom had said, like everybody had like friends that weren't, like using and drinking the way I was had said it to me. So
Mhm.
it was really a combination of people like that were like, hey, like there's a better way and you don't have to
Mm.
live like this. And so I just, did what was suggested of me. And, cause my way was not working at all.
Welcome to Amy Liz Harrison's podcast, Eternally Amy, a mum of eight's journey from jail to joy, a Gen Xer who overcame her struggle with alcohol to become a best-selling author and mental health advocate. She shares stories of hope and offers ideas for others struggling with mental health challenges. One thing is for sure, you'll leave with something to chew on. And now, here's your host, Amy Liz Harrison.
Greetings, compadres! Suki Jones is a San Francisco Bay Area based writer. Sidebar, I am from the San Francisco Bay Area too. Well, sort of the South Bay, Mountain View. So it doesn't really count, but hey, I'm throwing it out there. And this is not about me. So there you go. Let me continue on reading to you about Suki. She specializes in addiction and harm reduction, which is a big, big deal, you guys. And her debut memoir, Swallow Me, and that's SEA, Swallow Me, was published with Embers Art Press in February 2023, last year. So Jones has raised 2 children as a single mother in Oakland. Wow. And wait for it, she's been sober, you guys, 24 years. That's a long time. We're talking long-term recovery. She's worked with the Syringe Access Program at Glide Church SF and is a board member for the Harm Reduction Treatment Center in San Francisco. Please welcome Suki Jones. I'm so excited.
Hello.
Hi. Happy to have
I'm
you.
really happy to be here.
Thanks. Well, Suki, I would love to just give you the floor and have you just tell us about however much or as little as you would like to about your journey into recovery.
All right, I can do that. I tend to divulge a lot. I would say like there are trigger warnings. There are things that are difficult to listen to. There are difficult traumatic events that took place in my life. And I think it's really important to talk about, and I'm very open about talking about those particular things because I'm in 12, I've been primarily a 12-step person throughout my recovery. And my experience has been that a lot of people have had similar experiences as mine. And when you talk about it, like all things, it destigmatizes it. And I think it makes it more comfortable for other people.
Yes.
So, so with that being said, I grew up in the Midwest. As a small child, I lived in the Midwest. I had an alcoholic parent that was volatile. He was a Jekyll and Hyde. I wouldn't know. My mother and I wouldn't know which version of him we were getting. It could be like fun and jovial and like pulling pranks, or it could be like him just like, just erupting with anger and rage. And like you just didn't know which side of him you were going to get. So I had that growing up. My parents' relationship escalated to a point where my parents were like splitting up, getting back together, splitting up, getting back together. When they would split up, we would come out to California and stay with family here. And then we would end up going back to Nebraska. And then at one point, my dad's alcoholism started to escalate the way it does for so many of us. And he began to talk about killing my mother. And so we left the state because there was actual talk of her, there was a hit on her. So we left the state, and then I was sent back to the state because of a custody order because they hadn't finalized their custody agreement. So I went back to the state. During that period was my first experience taking a drug. My dad's plan, my dad and what would be his second wife, his girlfriend at the time, had plans of kidnapping me that were thwarted. But during that attempt, I was given Quaaludes and other drugs that I don't remember. The one I remember specifically were the Quaaludes because I remember the name on them. And I was 8, so I was very young. I was sent back to California, like through a legal process. I was brought back to California, had to testify against my dad. We had to go back to Nebraska again, my mother and I. And I testified against my father. And then he held that against me. He was mad that I testified against him in court. And so he didn't speak to me for almost 20 years. So, and that's, to me, like, that is kind of like, that's the epitome of like alcoholic thinking, that he would blame an 8-year-old for something that he, is trying to do. So that was when we moved to California permanently. At that point, I felt like that was going to be a new start for me. I was really excited about like leaving our previous life behind and starting over. We were living with my mother's parents at that time here in the Bay Area. And while living there, my grandfather started sexually assaulting me. So I went from one situation that was, difficult to navigate as a child to another situation that was equally as hard in different ways. So the sexual assault went on for a number of years until I physically attacked him. And that whole event happened to coincide with junior high. I was coming into my own and like had met some friends that were like party kids, like that hung out like at the back of the school and in the field. And so I really gravitated toward these other like kind of misfit kids. And I began using drugs and alcohol at that point in my life to deal with the trauma that I'd had up to that point. And it worked for a while. Like that really worked for me for a number of years. I also had like bulimia, anorexia, cutting, all of these things that were happening in my teen years. I had psychiatric hospitalizations. I ended up dropping out of high school because of just for a number of reasons, but really because I wanted to the only thing I wanted to do at school was to like connect with people to like party. That was my focus. And I was really uncomfortable. There were people at the school that knew that I had been in that I had been in a psychiatric facility and like taunted me about it or bullied me about it. So I dropped out, and I got into modeling a little bit at that time, and I ended up having 2 kids back to back, and really like my drinking and using it wasn't accelerating at that point. It wasn't until I went in for like just a health checkup, like a young mom going into the doctor like for a checkup, and the doctor prescribed me some narcotics for headaches, because I mentioned that I was having headaches, and he was like, "Oh, you're having tension headaches. I'll give you something for that." And right away, like I can very clearly remember like filling it and like taking the first one and like the feeling of it hitting and just being like click, like that, like I knew like that was the start of something. That's when it accelerated for me. Like it just ramped up like exponentially from that point to where I was like doctor shopping and then eventually like using heroin and cocaine and alcohol ecstasy and all of those things regularly, and then, and then strung out. So yeah, so it was a number of years like that I went along like that. And I didn't have consequences, I wasn't having a lot of consequences myself, but what started happening was that there were consequences in my friend circle. Somebody that I loved died. I had a friend that was shot. I had a friend that died, like people were dying from drug related things, or somebody that DUI, like all these like party related things where, and then I was starting to have close calls myself, like where I was having to be hospitalized for various things. And I was like, in my head, I would fall asleep at night and think, I'm gonna leave my kids without a mom. Like that's where this is headed. So, so it was like really begrudgingly that I went into my 12-step meeting. I really didn't want to go. I had run into a friend at a memorial service, and she was like, you don't have to live like this anymore. And I'm not even kidding. Like I kind of wiped my nose, like, like, I'm fine. And was like, I don't know what you're talking about. But meanwhile, I was, completely high. And it was because of her like gently suggesting to me, like repeatedly, hey, if you want to go to a meeting, hey, if you want to learn more about 12-step program, hey, if you don't want to be dope sick and hungover every day, it was just, she never like pushed it on me. She was just like, if you want to, I'll give you, I'll show you the way. And that was enough of like, I saw enough of her, of how her life was going, that I had seen a transformation in her and I didn't really know her well at that time. But I was like, wow, okay, it's worth it. It's worth a shot. So I went on a methadone program, and I went to 12-step. And as they say, the rest of it is history. Like it, and I don't want it to sound easy. Like it wasn't like, oh, and then it was all fine. Like it was like a year of me like going on and off, methadone tapers and trying to quit cold turkey, and like, like just like doing all these things that I thought like, oh, or maybe just drinking, or just using pills, or just using, like, it was just every classic thing, like switching from scotch to brandy, like, like everything you can think of. I thought like I had run through all the things that I thought like might help me get sober, and I just couldn't figure out how else to do it. So I went to 12-step.
So you went to 12-step meetings without going to treatment first?
I did not go to treatment.
Wow. That's impressive.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, I get it in hindsight, like, because, I know so many people that have been to at least one treatment facility, if not several.
Yeah.
And for me, because I had small kids and I was a single mom, like it just wasn't an option. For me, like methadone was the treatment. Like I invested in the methadone program. Like I invested emotionally into being on that methadone maintenance program. Like my life depended on it, because it did. Like I was like, this is, if I do this, like I had a super supportive counselor there. I was really lucky. And she was like, you got to do this for your kids. Like and I was like, yeah, like, cause I had heard that my mom had said, like everybody had like friends that weren't, like using and drinking the way I was, had said it to me. So it was really a combination of people like that were like, hey, like there's a better way, and you don't have to live like this. And so I just, did what was suggested of me, and, cause my way was not working at all,
Yeah. Yeah. So then, okay. So first of all, thank you for sharing all that. And then secondly, what would you say your drug of choice was then? Was it more of the opiates when you filled the prescription, or was it the drinking, or did it get to that point where it kind of, they were both just kind of blending?
For me, okay, so here's the thing, because my dad was such a classic alcoholic, I
Mm.
was always very, very aware of how much I was drinking because I didn't want to be an alcoholic. So
Yeah.
I thought, quote unquote, I'm not going to be like my dad.
Yeah.
And so I thought if I was doing just prescription pills or just heroin, just cocaine, like I wasn't the same as my dad. I thought that I was different than him, and that I didn't have a problem if I
Sure.
didn't look like him. And that really skewed how I viewed my own alcoholism, because the truth was, like, I couldn't drink and not do drugs, and they were so interwoven. Like I could go a week without drinking, but if I drank, as soon as I had that drink, like it was on.
Mm.
So I mean, everything was so interconnected. But
Mhm.
like my primary like substance of choice was any opiate at all.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. I always find it so interesting because, it seems like sometimes people will have sort of one or the other, but then, like I've had people who have come to me and asked to be sponsored, and they have an addiction that's not alcohol. And I'm
Yeah.
like, yeah, I'm down. I get it, because I don't know. I mean, I personally believe that addiction, it's all the same roots, like, it's in the same family, and so it's just such an interesting concept to me that nowadays it's just all so different, right? There are so many
Yeah.
different drugs out there, and just all the stories about like fentanyl and all of that. And so I love that when I was reading through your stuff, I was like, oh, the harm reduction piece is just so important. And I know it's a little bit controversial sometimes for people, but how did you
Yeah.
get involved in all of that?
Well, I mean, I'm in the Bay Area here. Like, I think like there are a lot of people that advocate for harm reduction. Like we
Yes.
happen to be in an area where it's acceptable and people support it. So, and also when I was actively using, like I remember like the little, the van with like it would literally be like a van with like clean supplies. And so I think that like harm reduction has come so far,
Yes.
but also drug drugs for users have changed so much. Like I was listening to some program on YouTube. I wish I could remember the guy's name, but he was talking about how like you're not the heroin users are not getting heroin anymore. Like it's not
Mm.
heroin. It's not the heroin I had, that's for sure, or the coke that I had. Everything is laced with fentanyl. Like it's nearly unavoidable.
Mm.
Um, and that's terrifying, that like it's
Oh,
terrifying not only that like a kid could die from just taking a random pill, but kids do die
right.
from taking a random pill. You don't have to be an addict. Like
Right.
it's not about like you know like people need to look at the harm reduction it's not about people, like even I've had family members that are like, I don't get it, like you're supplying, why would you give addicts like supplies, you're enabling them. I'm like, if you have, let's say you're at a party with a friend and your friend is drunk, can barely stand up, has their keys in their hand, and is determined they're going to go get in their car and drive.
Mhm.
Do you want them to go get in their car and drive, or do you want them to take a cab home?
Right.
Because that's my analogy with my
Yeah.
older family,
Yeah.
conservative members of my family. I'm like, you want them to get home safe.
Right.
And like, if you like, as an analogy, like getting home safe may be like them saving their life so that they can maybe get sober. You know, like nobody's getting sober if they're dead.
Right.
So, and it's just so important that like that is available for people, because it's a huge problem. Like it's a huge problem.
I love this so much because I was talking to a school administrator not long ago who I asked, "Do you have Narcan on campus? Do you keep it on campus?" And the person said, "What's Narcan?" And I was like,
Mm.
"Wait, hold on, what? Did you
Yeah.
say what's Narcan?"
Yeah.
Because and it just
And you're
was
an
so
administrator?
I mean it was very and it, this is another topic, but it was a religious school, and so I think there's this false perception that
Yeah.
like you said about, oh, well, people will think it's, oh, you're supplying addicts with supplies and all this, and it's like this is safety. Like this is
Yeah.
seatbelts in a car kind of safety,
Yes.
you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
And I love that you are speaking up about it because it is so important for us to break this stigma. And I hate that we have to have these kids dying after taking one pill. Um,
Yeah.
for people to even just go, wait a minute, yeah, no, my kid did not have a history, and this was their first time or whatever. I mean, I can't even handle that we are dealing with this. It's just so sad. And so I so appreciate the work that you're doing to build
Thank
awareness.
you. Yeah. Yeah. I think education
Yeah.
about fentanyl, about Narcan, about harm reduction. Um, like it's so important just for people to be educated about it. And you sharing with the school administrator right there, like every school should know how to administer Narcan, because you don't know, and you can't save someone if you don't have the tools to do it. Like if you don't have the Narcan and you don't know how to use it, then like it all starts, for me, like my thought is that like you have to educate people about it and make them aware.
Yeah.
So
Well, even like, I mean, I'm going to now date myself, but like in the 80s, right? Late 80s, I was taking like a babysitter's course, at the local hospital. No, I think it was at Red Cross first. But at any rate, they teach you how to do CPR, and it's like these
yeah.
are the basics, you know, basic first aid. And then you do the CPR, and it's like these are the like life things, And I love the fact that, now we can talk about no, like harm reduction, that goes in that category. Like this is a life,
Yes.
you know.
Yeah.
Um it's just, I think it's super important. And so now I would love to hear also about the process of you writing your memoir.
Oh my gosh. Sure.
What
um
was that like for you?
it was, well, I will tell you, I doubled up on my therapy sessions.
Uh-huh. Good for you.
It was, I've always written, so I had lots, like tons of like just like scraps of paper and spiral bound notebooks and old diaries and all this stuff. And I had been working on this book for a really, really long time. And like I would I would work on it like in spurts. Like I'd be like, yeah, I'm gonna write it, I'm gonna do it. And then like life would get in the way, and I'd be like, put it in the drawer, like I'll get back to that later. And like, sometimes I'd get back to it like, in a month or two, and sometimes it would be like 6 months or 9 months.
Mhm.
And it was like a lot of people during the pandemic, here I have all this downtime.
Yeah.
And it was my kids that were like, you need to finish your book. And so I was like, okay. So I made a point of writing every single day. And, eventually, what was just like random notes and, something I wasn't sure what I was doing with, it started to come together.
Mhm.
And I was like, oh my gosh, like I'm doing it. Like I'm writing, look at that. I'm writing the book. Um,
Love
so
it.
it was a long process. Um, and it was hard. It was really, I mean, part of the reason that like I would step away from it for 6, 9 months at a time is because, I was writing about like, sexual assault as a kid, and there were things that I wanted to talk to people about, and things I wanted to talk to my mother about in this, like, so I knew I wanted to have those conversations when I really wrote it.
Mhm.
And I knew also that those conversations were going to be really difficult.
Yeah.
So, and they were, but I gotta say, like at the beginning of the book, when I started at the beginning, when I started like seriously writing it, I had asked my mom. I said, "Do you want me to use your real name?" And
Mhm.
she said, "I don't think so. I think why don't you call me Rita?" And I was like, "Okay." So like I had throughout the whole book she was Rita, and then when I finished the book, it was like a week before I was submitting like the final manuscript. And my mom and I had talked about all this stuff about like the sexual abuse, and and about my dad and what it was like. There were things that she hadn't told me as a kid that came up when we were having these conversations. And when we finished, like that week before I submitted, my mom said, "You know what? I think I want to use my real name."
Mm.
And to me, that was her, like it was her taking ownership also of what happened,
Yes.
and like taking her power back. And that to me like was, I mean, like, not to sound cheesy, but like it was priceless. Like it
Yeah.
was her having that moment and getting to like experience that with her, and like her being like, "You know what? I use my real name."
Mhm.
Like
Goosebumps.
it was incredible.
That's amazing too, because, I know that at least for my parents' generation,
Yeah.
um, you know, therapy, working through your issues, even admitting your issues, kind of that was like not a thing. It wasn't frowned
Right.
upon, it wasn't readily available. Therapy was very expensive, going through the process of. So I love that she got to that point where she was able to get empowered and take
Yes.
I
Yeah.
love that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's still like it makes me feel emotional because
Yeah.
it was hard for her. Like like as a kid, like I remember, like it was hard for me as a kid. But she was, when I put myself in her place, she was a mom that was, like not sure, like she hadn't worked the whole time that my dad and her were married, and she was financially reliant on him. And he was threatening her life. And there were all these things that like I can't imagine as a mother like how hard that must have been for her to go through.
Yeah.
So it makes me really happy that she had that moment like through me, that she
Yes.
got to tell that her story has been told in
I
mine.
That's so beautiful. And I also love so much that you mentioned, like, yeah, some of the stuff was really hard, and I had to take breaks and talk to
Yes.
people, double up on my therapy. I mean, all of that self-care put in place. I mean, that's huge because it's like, once you sort of get to that point where it's like, I'm going to tell my story and I want to, I'm not going to just sugarcoat it. I'm going to put it out there. Right. And
Yeah.
in order to do that, that takes a lot. It takes a lot of energy. It takes, a lot of self love. And it takes a lot of like, okay, how am I going to tell this in the best way possible that's truthful, but also, that cares for other people. And you're
Yeah.
asking your mom, do you want me to use your real name or not at the beginning? And then she changes her mind. These are
Yeah.
just all such important things to think about,
Yeah.
when we tell our story. And I just think it's so lovely that you did that. And if you started during COVID, I love that you took your time. You didn't just
Yeah.
like rush through it, that's big. That's a big deal.
Yes. Yeah. Although in hindsight, like I wish I wish I hadn't waited until COVID because literally everyone wrote a book during COVID. So it did not make it easier for me. But
I'm one of
but
them. I get it. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yes, yes.
Yeah.
So yeah. But true to fashion, like to myself, like I am I do everything out of order. Like I that's just how, like
Yeah,
that's how I am. Like like I had kids, and then I like did like I worked more on modeling and like acting and stuff after my kids. I got
sure.
my addiction didn't ramp up until after I had kids, and like it just everything kind of came out of order for me.
Yeah.
Like I just do things like, okay, now I'm gonna do it.
Yeah.
So
But I love that because, I mean, because I come from 12 step too. That's how my sobriety has taken its shape.
yeah,
Um, often we hear speakers tell their stories and they're in a very almost predictable arc, right? Which
yeah,
is totally great and wonderful. So, but not everybody's story, not the actual details of their story look the same. And that's what I think is so powerful about, people like yourself, especially with long-term sobriety, coming forward and sharing your story and putting it in print because, you know, it is one size fits all, but it's not.
but it's not. Yeah. The other thing about that also, and important, something I think is important in my story is that I went into 12 step on methadone.
Mm,
And that was in January 2000. That was
mm,
like, and I mean, there is still within the rooms, like there are a lot of people that are, like, you're not really sober, you're not really clean, whatever. Um, and so it was a much bigger deal in 2000. And I wanted to make sure I included that in my
yeah,
story because it's so important, like you touched on, that like people have all these different pathways of how they get sober, and it looks different for everybody.
yeah,
For me, because like going to treatment was not an option for me. And I was raising kids, and so like I had to think about like what can I do to better myself, to get sober and like have the best chance.
mhm,
I just wanted the best, like what's my best chance of getting out of this? And like what I found was what, like I trusted my counselor, and the statistics, were that you had a better chance at long-term recovery if you did a methadone maintenance program.
mhm,
And so I did that. And I kind of like just didn't listen to the haters. Like there were a lot of people that in Narcotics Anonymous and Alcoholics Anonymous that were like not so keen on me,
yeah,
like like speaking in the meeting. Like I one time somebody said something about how I shouldn't speak in the meeting because I had used, and I was like, I'm not using, I am on a maintenance program. I I do urine tests. I had to justify my seat there.
yeah,
And I don't want anybody to ever feel like that,
mm,
because you deserve that seat just as much as anybody else. Like that seat is there for you. You
yep.
get there however you need to get there, and whatever's going to work for you.
Oh, I love it. Like, I love it. I preach is what I want to say because, I think that, um, especially like for those of us, for example, who come from like church backgrounds or something, it's
Yeah.
oh, well, this is like the way that we do things, right? And so,
Yes.
and that's fine. You can have that outlook, but I love that we don't shoot our wounded. And I think that,
Yeah.
however you can get in the door is how you get in the door,
Yeah.
and it takes such courage and sometimes very harrowing circumstances to actually get people in the door and into a seat, right? And it's
Yes.
already,
Yeah.
kind of traumatic enough, right? To go to a 12-step meeting if you're totally unfamiliar or if you're just broken or fragile, or, I mean, there's all this stuff, right? And it's like, I mean, I know for me, I was actually kind of jealous of the people in treatment who were on Suboxone and everything. I'm like,
Yeah.
dang, I mean, like, and I'm not saying that's an easier way or an easier path, but I just think at the time in my own brain, I was like, I feel so raw,
Yeah.
It was a miracle that I had the opportunity to go to treatment. I didn't see it that way, right, at the
Yes.
time at
Yeah.
all. But it was awesome and it was a miracle. And I would have only had meetings or 12-step program if without the treatment component and without that other educational piece. If I had just stumbled in and then somebody was like, oh, well, you're still drinking or you smell like booze from last night, I think that would have crushed me. Like, I'm not joking. I
Yes.
would have just been like, okay, bye. Screw
Yeah.
you guys.
And there's people like that like,
Yeah.
I mean, I have people message me all the time that say like, I left 12 step because they gave me a bad time about being on Suboxone, because I smoke weed, because I'm on methadone, like whatever that thing is. Like like you said, it is so hard to walk through that door the
Mhm.
first time as it is. It's so hard. Nobody's excited to go to their first 12-step meeting. Nobody's like, I can't wait.
Yes.
Yeah, like nobody's like, super
Yeah.
stoked to go there the first time. So like, don't make it harder for people. Like, meet
Right.
them where they're at, because if
Oh
you
my
want them to
God.
be successful and to like have long-term recovery, I don't, I'm sure there are plenty of people in the meetings that the first few meetings that I went to, that thought like, hey, like she's going back out, like, you know, but I was committed to it, and like,
Yeah.
like, and you don't know, you never know what's going on with somebody, like what, you don't know what their circumstances are, and even if you think you know what their circumstances are, you don't know.
One thing that
So
I have found in my recovery is that I never have enough information to judge somebody else's circumstance or recovery or whatever.
right.
And I'll even see like these, sort of weird parking lot debates sometimes where it's like, well, I took steps 1, 2, and 3 in 20 minutes, and that's how they did it in Akron. And, like, you just kind of like, well, great, you do you. Because the
Yeah.
point is, how cool is it that we are both here together sharing this space today? And what a gift that is. And so, yeah, like I love that you stayed true to yourself. I bet it wasn't easy, to just keep
It was
yeah.
not.
Yeah.
I mean, just being on methadone,
Yeah.
as a young single mom, like, like I would have to like get to the clinic before I took the kids to school, or they would have to go to the clinic with me on the way to school, or, like it was all these, like juggling that you had to do. Like it was hard, and like that, yeah, that wasn't easy. Getting sober wasn't easy. Doing 12 step wasn't none of it was easy, but it wasn't miserable and chaotic. And what I had going in active addiction and alcoholism, like it was a reprieve from that. A lot
Mhm.
of work, but like a lot better than the alternative.
Oh, absolutely. Okay, so switching gears, kind of rewinding for a second back to
Yeah.
the book. So, as we kind of approach wrapping up, I would love to hear about how you selected the title.
Oh, okay. Well, okay, so for years and years and years, um I had called the book Fever Bleeding,
Ah,
which is like nothing. Like it's a made up, it just reminded me of um like leeching, or just like some medieval, it reminded me of all of this, like exercising your demons and that sort of thing.
mhm.
And I was like, I can't, like it's the most like histrionic, like like ridiculous type. I'm like, I cannot call the book that. And so I was talking with my editor friend over coffee one day, and I said, I don't know what, like we were tossing around names and like coming up with ridiculous names. Like, what can I call it? And I said, I wish I could just call it "See Swallow Me" after the Cocteau
Mm,
Twins song. And
mm,
he goes, well, why don't you? And I was like, because you can't do that because of copyright. And he was like, no, 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 you can use the song title, you just can't use the lyrics. And
mm.
I'm like, well, it's a Cocteau Twins, so there's like no real lyrics anyway. But but he, yeah, so I was like, really, are you sure? And it's like I researched it, looked into it. He assured me like several times, because he'd written a handful of books. He was like, no, I'm sure you can do that. And so
Mm.
I was like, well, that's it. Like that's the
Boom.
title. And it was very just the imagery
Mhm.
is very apropos, I think, for the book, because it encompasses like the feeling that I had of just being engulfed in something that
Mhm.
I couldn't swim out of, that I couldn't break free of, that I felt swallowed up. And so it was like I felt like it was the perfect title.
Oh, I love it
And it's
because,
a lovely song. So,
well, and you've survived so much. And, getting to that point where you have survived things means you've paid a hefty price in a lot of areas of your life, right? And so, like, I just, I'm pretty much blown away too that I can have this conversation with somebody who's been through so many things to get you to this point today. I love that you were able to select a title that is what you felt in your heart it should be. And you didn't have to worry about those legal implications and this and that because that's how it is sometimes for us is like we'll resonate with something and we'll just go like, yeah, that's it.
yeah.
And so I love that you chose that.
Yeah,
I just think
I'm happy with it too. Like it as soon as I said it, like I was like, oh, I wish I could just name it that. And then it
yeah.
was like, oops, you can. So
And when does that ever happen? Yeah, it's like,
never, never
right?
happens. Or rarely.
Yeah.
So it was kind of a magical, like, like where you're like, oh, like everything sparkled for a minute.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So great. So what's next for you, Suki? Are you gonna do like a part 2 of your book? Are you gonna continue on with your volunteer work with harm reduction or what's your
I
heart?
I continue to work with harm reduction, and I have, articles I'm working on for various
Mhm.
sources. And then I'm working very, not as slow as the first book, but I am working slowly on a second book that is memoir style.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Uh,
So yeah, yes,
I
so that's
feel like,
exciting.
yeah, it's so
Yeah.
exciting. And, I feel like you've got so much in your treasure chest. You've got so many beautiful jewels. Like I just keep
Mm,
getting this visual of all of these um stories, these things that happened to you and how you've clearly learned to work through those and to achieve a level of healing that it is your own, right? And your own brand of that. And I love that because it's so powerful. It's so, so inspirational. And so I can't thank you enough for
thank
sharing your
you.
story. truly, what a gift. And I love that, you have kids and family members who can see you living this sober life, and then it's not just like, oh, well, yeah, I think I'm not going to drink this holiday season. I'll just do dry January, right? Like,
Yeah.
it's like, no, this is the real deal. I've been doing this for like multiple decades now, so that's incredible.
Thank you. Thank
Yeah.
you.
I'm so, so excited to meet you. I'm so thrilled. And thank you again. I know, and I just can't say it enough, but for the work that you're doing with harm reduction,
Mm.
it's vital.
Thank you.
It is
Thank
vital.
you.
We're in a new world, people. Like, that's
Yes.
the
Yeah.
thing. We're in a new place. And
Yeah.
it's so important to be aware of this and not put our heads in the sand and think, oh, it's not going to happen to my kid. My
Right.
kid,
Yeah.
doesn't hang out with those people, or whatever it is that we want to tell ourselves.
Yes.
Um,
Whatever it is, private school, suburbs, out in
whatever.
the country, wherever you are, there is fentanyl. You can touch your family. Like,
Yep.
that's the reality.
Yep. Yep. And the more we like normalize these things, I think, it again is kind of a reminder to me of like when they started becoming a little more, I guess I'll use the word lax. That's not really what I mean, but like open to talking about kids and sexuality and how to stay safe. And it's like the more we normalize these things,
Yes.
the more empowering it really is, and these are the conversations that I know that, I have with my kids. It's not super comfortable. It's not something I love talking about with them, but I'll be damned if I don't open my mouth and say something to like, this is kind of common in my house to talk about this kind of stuff, so much so that I think my kids are like, okay, yeah, we got it. Enough.
Those are how
But
my kids are too.
I
I'm
know,
like,
right?
do you need Narcan? Does anyone need Narcan? They're like, I
Right,
still have the Narcan you gave me last time. I'm like, okay, just want to make sure. Like,
right? Like, let's
because
check the expiration dates. Yeah,
yes, yeah,
yeah, yeah. And just how important it is too, because you never know what arenas you might be in where they will say, what's Narcan?
yeah,
So
yeah.
an important thing to carry with us, right? So Suki, thank you for lighting up this space and this time together. I appreciate you and the work that you're doing. And if you're listening, by the way, if you are listening to this podcast, just remember to be kind, rewind. Thank you for the honor of your time. Take what you like and leave the rest behind.
Thank you so much for listening to Eternally Amy, a mum of eight's journey from jail to joy. Amy Liz Harrison is a best-selling author, speaker, 12-step coach, meditation teacher, and recovery advocate. To find out more, please visit amylizharrison.com. You can keep up with Amy on all platforms by following @AmyLizHarrison. Please subscribe and review this podcast. It means so much to us if you do.